Here we are at part 3 of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So the sailors are, of course, suffering from dehydration. Their water supply runs out. Good time for me to take a drink of water, too. And this suffering is very true to life because human beings cannot survive without water. We're 70% water, something like that. And humans can survive longer without food than without water. The normal adult male needs to have 2 to 3 liters of water each day to replace what is lost through normal bodily functions. You don't get enough water, you start to feel faint and tired, you're just not doing as well. So without the replacement of this water, dehydration occurs, and then there's serious health dangers. So if I get to our poem, part 3. Okay. There passed a weary time. Each throat was parched and glazed each eye. A weary time, a weary time. How glazed each weary eye. Note all that repetition that's going on there. When looking westward, I beheld a something in the sky. At first it seemed a little speck, and then it seemed a mist. It moved and took at last a certain shape. I wist. A speck, a mist, a shape. I wist, and still it neared and neared, as if it dodged a water sprite. It plunged and tacked and veered, with throats unslaked, with black lips baked. We could not laugh nor wail. Through utter drought, all dumb we stood. I bit my arm, I sucked the blood, and cried, a sail, with throats unslaked, with black lips baked. Agape they heard me call, gramercy, which is short for grant mercy. They for joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in, as they were drinking all. See, see, I cried, she tacks no more, hither to work us wheel. Without a breeze, without a tide, she steadies with upright keel. The western wave was all aflame, the day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad, bright sun, when that strange shape drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun. Okay, so this is important. They see a sail, they see a ship, and then this boat comes between them and the sun, and it kind of blocks it out, like an eclipse of the sun. And that's important once you find out what's on this ship. And straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother, send us grace. As if through a dungeon grate he peered, with a broad and burning face. So like the mass of the ship were blocking the sun as if it were prison bars. So some more imagery. You're supposed to be able to see this in your mind. So try to envision it. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears! Are those her sails that glance in the sun like restless gossamers? And those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? And is that woman all her crew? Is that a death? And are there two? Is death that woman's mate? Her lips were red, her looks were free. Okay, so more personification, you might think, but this is actually describing who is on the ship. Her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold, her skin was as white as leprosy. The nightmare life in death was she, who thicks man's blood with cold. The naked hulk alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. Two people are casting dice. The game is done, I've won, quoth she, and whistles thrice. The sun's rim dips, the stars rush out. At one stride comes the dark, so an unnatural setting of the sun. With far-heard whisper o'er the sea, off shot the spectra bark. Off goes the ghost ship. We listened and looked sideways up, fear at my heart as at a cup. My lifeblood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick the night. The steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. From the sails the dew did drip, till clomb above the eastern bar the horned moon with one bright star. Within the nether tip. One after one by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pain, and cursed me with his eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. The souls did from their bodies fly. They fled to bliss or woe, and every soul that passed me by, like the whiz of my crossbow. He had shot the albatross with the crossbow, so it's like it's coming back to haunt him. So what was that all about? Did you catch it? I'll do kind of a recap, and then we'll take a look at the questions that go with this part. The ancient mariner saw a sign far off, thought it was a sail, and as it gets closer and approaches, it seems to be a ship, and he bites his arm to get some blood so that his throat is not so dry, and then he can cry out, a sail, because otherwise, since they haven't had any water, haven't talked for days, he didn't have any moisture, couldn't talk. So initially they're very happy and then horrified because there's still no wind and the ship is coming toward them. No wind, no tide, nothing. So how is it moving? It seems to be nothing but a skeleton ship, and its ribs are seen as the bars on the face of the setting sun. Ribs being those masts that it would have. There is some sort of specter woman and a death mate on board this skeleton ship, and they're playing with dice, and they have played for the ship's crew, and she wins the ancient mariner, it seems. There's no twilight. All of a sudden just the sun sets and then the moon rises, and then one after another the shipmates drop down dead. Thunk, 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 thunk. And one by one the souls go whizzing by them. Zoop, 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 zoop. Can you imagine how creepy that would be? Life in death then begins her work on the ancient mariner, and so she's won him, and we're going to find out what happens next. So let's see. Why did the sailor bite his arm and suck the blood? So that he had enough moisture to talk. What appears this ghost ship? Why is it horrifying? Because it's got to be supernatural if it's moving without wind or tide. The ship and its passengers or crew, it's this death woman and death mate, and they're playing dice for the ancient mariner's soul. What happens to the 4 times 50 men, 54 men? They all thunk down dead and their souls fly past. Note that the character on the skeleton ship, Life in Death, has won the life of the mariner. He's now condemned to be the only one who's living on and suffering some kind of living death as the poem continues. But just as it's getting really serious here, we have an interruption again from the wedding guest so that we don't get too scared as we move into the next part.